Good evening, Internet, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Camera Dads podcast. I am one of the hosts, Mr. Phil Ringsmith, and as always, with me on the other side of the Internet is my co-host and brother, Mr. Simon Ringsmith. How are you doing tonight, Simon?
Good evening, Phil, coming to you live from the other side of the Internet. Glad to be here for episode number 10. And I wanted to mention something before we even get started at all with the episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, do us a favor and subscribe. We want to hit 100 subscribers so we can get our own custom URL, youtube.com/cameradads. We can't do that till we get 100. So we promise one video a month. That's all we will do. You won't get
no spam. No spam.
Yep. No spam. So with
Just
that being
good
said,
quality dad.
Absolutely. Every time. Free. Right, delivered to you. And to Phil, then, what's tonight's quality camera dad topic all about?
So tonight we're talking about what you can do with printing your photos. This is something that you and I have kind of bounced around with each other over the years and have always had an interest in. And it's kind of an interesting topic because as we, in this generation, we have sort of transitioned from film cameras, like that's what I had when I was a kid, where every photo you took got printed, to, and you were much more careful about the photos that you took.
You had 24 photos and there was money behind each one of those. So
oh yeah. But now we're in this completely different world where you can take hundreds of photos, thousands of photos, and not think anything of it. And we've gone back and forth on, I think one of our very first episodes was about how to manage that many photos, 10,000 photographs.
That's right. Yeah.
And I wonder if sort of the art of printing photos has been lost over these last 20 years.
Yeah, it's weird because we actually have more options now than we ever did when we were kids, but it seems like people don't print as many photos as when we were kids. And maybe that's not actually true. Maybe people do print more, but yeah, I know what you mean. It seems like for nowadays, printing is something that you'll get around to sometime, but back 20 years ago, you had to print your photos because it's the only way to see them.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. I recall very distinctly this trip that I took in 5th grade. My elementary school class followed the Oregon Trail across Nebraska.
I know that trip because my wife was with you on that trip.
And one of the things I remember is I had this little purple sort of rectangular, that wasn't a 35 millimeter, I don't know what it was. The rolls of film that you put into it looked like the voicemail icon. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It is they called it a 110 camera.
Okay. And so I went on that trip, and I still have all these photos. But one of the things I remember is maybe being one day in and already having used a third of the film that I brought.
Yeah.
Which is exactly that problem of having to be careful about what you photograph because you're only going to get those prints versus now where are you even going to bother to print anything? And if you do, what are you going to do with it? And that's kind of, for me, that's kind of where this idea of printing photos sort of has its roots in how are you going to re-experience those photos yourself? And how are you going to share those photos with other people?
Yeah, and it's interesting because nowadays you don't need to print them to share them. There's so many ways to share photos that printing used to be the only way. Now it's kind of relegated to the back row of all these possibilities. And my oldest son just had picture day at school, and we got these price sheets and everything, and even the pricing on these seems so weird because they all come with a sheet of wallet size prints, and I don't know anyone who pulls out their wallet to show pictures of anything. It's all on their phone, and I think on these school pictures, if you got any package $35 or more, you got a free super tiny digital, like a 2-inch by 3-inch 72 DPI. I mean, just like the lowest resolution picture possible. And it says on the
thumbnail, basically.
Yeah. And they're like, you can, if you order $35, we'll send you for free a digital version for sharing online. But it was so low res, you would never want to print it. And it's almost sort of backwards. I think more people would order pictures if they could just get one really nice high resolution digital file for $35, and then they can decide if they want to print it. But I don't know. That's crazy talk, I guess. I don't know. I don't make these rules, so we didn't buy anything.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up, and this wasn't in our notes at all. But and it actually leads into our next show already. But when we get photos taken somewhere, family photos, one of the things that we look for is whether or not we can get the digital copies, like the full size. We own the rights to this digital copies. And I don't want to step on our next show too much, but because we're talking about professional portraits. But, we go there to get prints. We go to a photo place, with the kids to get some nice family photos, to get them printed so that we can frame a couple, put a couple in their scrapbooks, and then pass the rest out to family members. Mm-hmm. But because we're on this other side of the coin now, we have to make sure that we have the digital copies of those photos, mostly so that if we want to order reprints, or if we want to order prints of something else, we can do that on our own.
Yeah,
we can take those, we own them. Because sometimes I feel like they're trying to sort of catch you with that. Like you go to a photo place and you get your photos done so that you can have prints. And maybe that's what people do. Like generally speaking, is they only print photos from a portrait studio or something. And then they don't print their own. I don't know, but we do a lot of our own printing, and I don't mean printing on a printer here at home. I mean printing.
You and your wife.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of combing through the photos that we have taken. It doesn't really matter which camera they were taken on, because our cell phones are pretty much just fine. Mm-hmm. And we'll make photo books, and we'll get photos printed usually at Walgreens.
Well, let me I want to touch on everything you just said, because there's so much good stuff in there. But I want to give a quick overview for any listeners who want to know kind of what generally we're going to be talking about. So hopefully tonight we've got under the umbrella of printing photos, we're going to talk about, is it important to even print our photos in the first place? And if so, why is it important to print our photos? We're going to talk about how Phil and I decide what photos we print from all the thousands that we have. When do we print them? How do we display them? Where do we get our photos printed? And I'm kind of burying that near the end. If you want like a actual tip for what you can do, if you want our advice, Phil and I will talk about where we get our photos printed, and maybe give you listeners an idea of where to go. And we'll maybe touch a little bit on some technical things like megapixels and full frame versus crop and cell phones and all this stuff. So we'll touch on a little bit on tech stuff. So that's kind of a rundown. And I don't know, Phil, can we do it in an hour, in 40 minutes?
We're going to, yes. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yes. We're going to make this.
Well, we can. So with that umbrella, thank you for putting that up.
No problem.
Let me ask you, what's your motivation for printing photos? When you get to that point, you decide that you're going to do some prints for whatever reason. What's that like for you? What's the process?
That's a good question, because it's changed a lot over the years. There's the photos we get printed fall into two main categories: artwork for the walls. And I'm looking up and I see a picture of a bird and a picture of a unicycle against a tree. And these are things the pictures that we took that mean something to us. And then we also print pictures in a photo book once a year. My wife and I go through and put all the most important, I guess you'd say, most memorable photos in the past year into a photo book. And yes, we are currently about a year and a half behind on that because we have to actually we got to select the photos and put them in the software and make the book. And it's a process. Anyone who knows it's a process. So I don't even know what your original question was anymore, Phil. Something about why do
There's
we?
a lot. Sorry, there is a lot of stuff that we have sort of written down for this show, and I think we're kind of going to jump all over the place a bit.
We probably are, and it's interesting that you ask me because I think you and your wife. My general sense is you get photos printed a lot more often, and even looking behind you on the video feed here, there's 1, 2, 3, at least 3, 4 pictures of your kids hanging on your wall that you had made prints of, and I have nothing. I have like a back here.
Some sort of
it's
fancy fartsy thing.
Well, yeah, it's a picture from Spain, I think. So I have nothing. You've got pictures of your kids.
Before we started, you made a comment to me about how the background was different here in the office, and I did that on purpose. This thing, if you're watching the video, this sort of artwork display on the wall behind me. If you're not watching the video, it's just it's a fence post board that's been split in half with some string and hooks tied to it, and we can hang about 20 photos or artwork, kids drawings, that kind of thing on there. And the reason that I repositioned it here so that you can see a little bit of this I'm in my office. This is where I work. I'm in here 4 or 5 days a week. And so when I sit here at the desk, this is always in my peripheral. And not even that, it's right there. And so
yeah, it's really cool.
I'm trying to do the weatherman thing and it's not working, but I've got pictures of 1, 2, 3, 4 pictures of the kids up there.
Mm-hmm.
And those were chosen by me from prints that my wife had made for another project that she was doing. She threw in some extra prints and she's like, here's what you have. Here's what you can pick. So I know we're working on this project for your office and here you go. And I was like, yes, I want this one and this one. And what about that one of so-and-so doing such and such? And that just, I don't think that there's a way to replicate that digitally.
Well, so why, this goes back to my question of, or not my, but our question of why do we get prints made? And in your case, why wouldn't you just get a cheap LCD screen and put it on the wall and have it rotate through a series of digital pictures? Because now I can see 4 pictures. And honestly, this is one reason my wife and I don't have a lot of pictures of our kids on the walls, because they grow up so fast that it almost seems like we're slackers if I have got a picture of my kid, because it's going to be 6 months out of date in no time. So why not just have a digital frame on the wall? Why, Phil? Why do we do humans need a tangible piece of printed material? Why can't we just put a screen up or something like that?
I'm no chaos theorist, but perhaps it's just because we're human and we tend to appreciate and we resonate well with tangible things. On a less philosophical answer, your very first word in that question to me was cheap. You said, why don't you get a cheap LCD, digital photo frame and hang it on the wall? That's the number one reason right there, is because most of the time they're junk.
Yeah.
In my opinion, they're just not worth, they don't cost very much. And even the ones that do aren't going to be worth it, because
it's another
gizmo. It's another gadget that you got to plug in. And I'm a gadget guy, for crying out loud. But I would rather build my own digital photo frame out of an old laptop for the experience of having done that than the end result of having a digital photo frame on the wall.
Well, and if I think about a cheap screen, we're still talking, you got to buy the screen, you got to mount it, you got to plug it in, you're going to have cords hanging around. And by that time, if each of those prints on your wall was 30 cents, you could have bought 100 prints or more, like thousands of prints,
like a thousand prints
you could
for
have
the
bought
price of
1,000 prints. Yes, I'm sorry, 1,000 prints. Um, wow, I felt like Austin Powers, $1 million. But anyway, yeah, you could have bought 1,000 prints by the time. Holy good gravy, Phil! That was the biggest coffee mug I've ever seen. For those of you not watching the video, you just missed out on like the monster truck of
half-gallon
water bottles. Okay, sorry, Phil.
That's how I stay so dad bod fit.
I guess. So by the time you buy all this cheap stuff, these cheap electronics, you've spent the money that you could spend on a ton of prints. So even if we look at the cheapest digital option, it's actually still a lot more expensive than just getting some prints made at your local Walgreens. And you got to plug it in. And then what happens if you turn the lights out? You're like, these photos are permanent on your wall, and that screen can be turned off. So
yeah, that just doesn't work for me. Maybe it's the quality isn't there. Maybe it's the fact that it's got to be plugged in, and what happens if your internet connection goes down, or you got an SD card in there that you got to change photos on. There's just, as much as I like tinkering, and I'm thinking to myself that, Phil, this sounds like the perfect thing for you. What's the matter with you? Something about having those physical prints makes the world of difference.
You know, it does.
I don't have a better answer than that.
So my wife and I, on our 10th wedding anniversary, which was last summer, we left our kids with our parents, grandma and grandpa, and we went to Seattle for a couple of days. On the way to Seattle, we went to Omaha, Nebraska, and we spent an afternoon at the Joslin Art Museum. And we walked around looking at physical artwork and statues and paintings and these artifacts from our cultural history. And it wasn't screens with artwork. There was actual artwork that people had sculpted and painted and created. And I think even in today's saturated digital world, there's this connection that we form, that we people form with a physical object we can touch. And so if I'm looking at those pictures on your wall, Phil, and I stop by your office and see these pictures, it's pretty likely, because I know myself, I'm going to spend more time looking at those 4 pictures because I can hold them in my hand than I would if you handed me your phone and said, here's some pictures of my family. I would probably just flip through one by one by one. And we've all been there, right? You just start scrolling, flipping through, and you don't spend a lot of time engaging with each photo. But because these are physical objects, I have more of a connection to them, and I'm going to be more likely to actually pay attention to them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I was thinking about how to,
because I'm always right.
Well, yeah,
on everything.
You're a dad. I was thinking about how to frame that same comment earlier about and bringing up the photos of whatever, and then just passing your phone around. And that works okay, but it's not as physical as just having that tangible photograph there in your hands. It's not, I don't know.
Yeah. And so to me, I think we've established, and I don't know if that's the right term, but I think we've made the case for the benefit of having physical prints. I see a clear benefit. It's a pain for us to go through and make these photo books every year, and they have hundreds of photos. I think our last one had 600 pictures in it. And it takes a long time, but I think there's a reason that we do that. So my next question then, as we explore this topic, is why don't we do this more often? What's the barrier here that's preventing me or you or other people from getting prints? And how can we overcome that barrier?
I don't know.
Oh man. Well,
yeah, that's it.
I'll see you next week, everybody.
So maybe the barrier is, I wonder if part of the barrier is that we don't know enough about what the average person actually does. But I think we got a pretty good feel that they don't print as many photos as they used to, generally speaking.
Yeah, that might be
And
true.
maybe the other part of it is that there's an inconvenience to it now, odd as that may seem. You have to go online, go to Walgreens, go to um, stock photo book. What I can't think of the name of these other ones.
Yeah.
And do something. You got to build something. You got to choose your photos. You got to arrange them. If you want to add text, you got to add text. You got to figure out what size prints you want. Maybe it's just that there's too much work. And as I say that, I'm reminded of something that Google announced earlier this year at their I/O event. And I don't know if this is live yet, but they're going to offer a photo book service, just like Apple did like
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
years ago. But Google has so much machine learning behind them that basically their idea is, hey, you upload all your photos to Google, which is something I do. Google will say, hey, it looks like you took a trip to Seattle over that week. And so it's going to go through and it will pick what it thinks are the best photos of your trip to Seattle, and it'll make a book and it'll say, hey, I made this book for you. Do you want to order it? And then you can order it. You can change it if you want to. But
yeah, and honestly, that's Phil, you know how I feel about Google, which is not that highly, but I think that's solving a problem that desperately needs to be solved. I haven't yet used any photo site, and I've investigated a lot of them that just makes it easy. And you have to create an account. You have to just click, yes, I want to use Flash, for crying out loud. Some of the photo sites still use Flash. You have to create an album, upload photos to the album. Can I drag and drop? Well, maybe then the drag and drop doesn't work. You got to select your size, you got to crop, then you get these warnings that pop up. I mean, it's just, when I think about the process of doing this, it's so much easier for me to just say, never mind, I won't do it. And I'll just pull up my phone and use that. And so I think what Google has done is simplify that whole process so much so that you don't even have to, they do all that thinking for you. And I won't be using that service, but I think it's a brilliant idea for them to do. And I'm glad that it's out there, and hopefully people will use that, and hopefully other people will do stuff like that, because there's a market, man. There's a lot of people who want to get their photos printed, but they don't, because it's just a hassle. And if the last time I got photos printed, I went to Walgreens because it's close to my house, so I can drive down to Walgreens and get my photos. And I can order 3 photos if I want and go down and pay 98 cents for 3 photos, and it's not a big deal. But even then, it's still kind of a complicated process. So I don't know.
yeah,
I think it's absolutely worthwhile to get photos printed, but I don't do it because of all these things, these barriers to entry.
Doesn't that seem odd though? Why should it be so difficult to do something which, if you think about it, 20 years ago was the only way to go?
Well, it was weird. 20 years ago,
you came from a world where when you take your film prints, the only way you can get those is to develop them and have prints. And if you want to order bigger ones, you go back to the photo store and say, here's the negatives. Can I get these prints in an 8x10?
Well, now I think one of the biggest barriers to getting photos printed is we have so many. And if I want to get some photos printed of my trip to Seattle or my kid's birthday party or something, I've got 360 photos to choose from. So I've now got to, I have to be selective about which ones I want to get printed. And before, there was no option. You walk in with that roll of film and drop it off at the grocery store, and every photo got printed, and you had 4x6 or 3x4 or something. There was very few options. And so I think because there was so much less in terms of options available to you, it removed a lot of those barriers to entry. I didn't have to select the photos because they're all getting printed whether I like it or not. I've already selected them in my mind when I took the pictures. That's when I decided that moment was worth sharing. And if I look at some of the prints I've got sitting around in old photo books, nowadays I would have 25 pictures in my memory card where there used to be just a single picture. And now I'm searching for the perfect picture. And what if I don't get the lighting right? And hey, can you scoot over here? Because this thing is in the background. And before I couldn't think about that. I just took a picture and there went 5% of all of the pictures that I could take on that memory card, that piece of film or that roll of film.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Phil,
that's, I agree with that.
let me ask you then, Phil, as we talk about all this stuff with printing, what makes it important to you, or how do you decide what to display? And I'm asking this because you have some unique ways of displaying your photos. When you get photos printed, do they get buried in a scrapbook? Do they go on your wall? Do they go in frames? And at your old house, you had this wall of photos. And you walk into your living room and there's like 50 photos each in frames and all this. So what do you do once you get over these hurdles and get your photos printed? Then what becomes of all your images?
Well, first of all, it helps to have a wife who really likes getting photos printed. When she was younger, she was into photography so much that she would develop her own prints.
Oh, are you serious?
In a dark room.
Man.
Yeah.
Much respect to your wife, Phil.
We have at her parents' house are some of the pictures that she developed herself. In high school in a dark room, and she loves getting photos printed, and so that helps. And I wanted to bring up, like you said, that at my old house, which we've been at this house 2 years, and we were at the old house 7 years. So maybe some of it here. We don't have many photos here, and maybe we just haven't figured it out yet. But we had this wall. It's called an accent wall, where you've got, and sort of this space in a room where you paint one of the walls a different color. And we painted this wall this really sort of bold dark red, kind of like, if you're on the video, the base of this tree behind me. And
it was cool. It was really cool to see that. It was
actually just the color of your wall, basically.
This wall right here.
Yeah, that one. The idea was to start with these. We found these, I think they held 15 4x6 prints in kind of a diamond shape. And you could hang it vertically or horizontally. And our vision was, let's start with 3 of these. Hang 2 vertically and 1 horizontally so that we can have portrait and landscape prints. We'll put those on the wall. And then we got a whole bunch of really thick poster board. I can't think of what it's called. You go to like a hobby store.
Man, it's like a whole Pinterest project here.
Oh yeah. This is a big deal.
Blog about
my wife did most of the work, but she loved doing it, and I loved the end result that we got out of it. So at the end of the day, we had probably, I'm going to guess, closer to 100 photos on that wall, all of them framed in this black mat, and just sort of stacked all over the place. And that was just this vision that you would walk into our house and you'd see years and years of this story. We had like her family and my family, and then we had where they blended, and we had pets, and we had, extended relatives, and it was just this awesome project.
So what do you do when they go out of date, though? Do you leave the old ones from 3 years ago in there? Do you take them out?
My wife would rotate them.
Seriously?
She made a habit of every couple of months of rotating those photos and keeping them in season. Yeah.
In season?
So it's like a manual version.
Wow.
It's like a manual version of that LCD, photo frame.
Yeah.
But we've changed a little bit since then. We just don't have the same type of space here. And we haven't figured out quite yet how we're going to do a photo display here, but we're getting closer. What we do have, as far as on the walls, I think there's these combo prints. They're like a 10x14 or something, one for each kid. As you come in the house and sort of walk up the stairs into the main room, you go past 3 of these, so you can see each kid, and they each one is made up of 3 prints, so it's a collage.
Okay, I think I recall what you're talking about.
And then, though, let's see, the other thing that we have is sort of like this artwork board behind me, but it's got different photos of the family members, and it's kind of that same idea of sort of that huge photo wall, but it's much more toned down. And it's got some very carefully selected photos on it. One of them is one that it's just all 3 of our kids sitting there with their feet out front, and the only thing in the photo is their toes, is their bare feet.
So, all right. So let me stop you before you get too far. There's probably some listeners out there who have a library on their computer with thousands of photos, and they might be thinking, okay, that's great. What Phil, what you're doing sounds really cool. And I'm thinking that at the same time. How do you decide what photos to print? And how do you decide which ones are frame worthy versus scrapbook worthy? I mean, these are some of the barriers that people face when they're thinking about getting photos printed.
I think you just get better at that over time.
Okay.
I think it helps to have a good idea of what you want to accomplish first, instead of saying, I want to get 10 photos printed and make something out of them, or just, get the X number of photos printed. I think it helps to have an idea of what your end goal is.
That's a good idea. I hadn't really thought about that.
All right, I know that I need 2 landscapes and 2 portraits of each kid, and then one of the family, because this is what I'm going for. Here's what my walls look like in the house. There's going to be a photo there, and there.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's what I would like to see. And for me, that approach works a lot better, because you end up being very selective about what you do choose, and you're sort of forced into picking. In our case, with the 3 kids, we've got a very similar photo age-wise, like an infant, 2-year-old, and a older, like a 5 or something like that. 3 different versions, but the same sort of spread, or the same idea. Okay. One for each kid in 3 very specifically chosen places.
Well, and honestly, I think that approach would probably help someone who's just not really sure what to do with all the photos in their computer. If you have a concept in mind of, I want similar photos at similar stages of life, or I want the birthday party photo of the kid blowing out their candles or something, and I know that I want that photo, then that can sort of guide your thinking as you are taking your pictures. And if you kind of have the end result in mind, then you'll be more likely to take pictures and then print pictures that meet that end result. Otherwise, it's just sort of a nebulous goal that doesn't really have focus. And you say, well, we should get photos printed. Okay, what kind of photos should we print? I don't know. Let's get some that looks good. What looks good? And so you end up with this rabbit hole of questions. But what you're saying, Phil, is no, start with the end in mind, and say, like, I've got this frame that looks really good right here, and the wall color is red, so we need photos of the kids where they're each wearing a red shirt so it matches the wall or something. And now you're starting to guide the process, the mental process of taking those pictures.
Yeah, you kind of do it in reverse, I think.
Well, and you guys
start with where you want to end up, and then you work backwards to get the photos. And go ahead. You were going to ask a question.
Well, and even you guys, even having vertical and horizontal frames. So now you know that when you're out taking pictures of the kids, you better make sure there's a horizontal one in there, because that horizontal frame on the wall, that's like 4 months out of date. And so you need to make sure you get a horizontal. Otherwise, you might not do that. And
I think it's good to just have that in the back of your mind, that there's a reason I'm taking all these photos, because some of them will go on the wall, in these situations. And real quick, I want to move on to sort of the other thing, and that's photo books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think we're entering this. This is what Google really wants to do, is make those decisions for you. They really want to analyze your photos and say, hey, these are the best ones. Trust
Boo,
me.
boo,
Right?
boo on Google.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Don't like it. Hey,
They're trying to say,
you go
okay,
jump out the window.
10 photos of this, and we've looked them all over. Here's the best one. Hey, look, we even took a smile from this one and put it on this one, because now
No, forget that. No, I will never buy that book. And how does Google know my criteria for judging
They don't.
best?
They don't.
Oh, that's a whole other thing. But I come back to, I think the idea of automating the process, I'm a fan of that idea. And so, yeah, we can go on about what Google does, but I do think they're solving a problem that needs to be solved.
Sure.
But you mentioned,
it's just not for everybody.
yeah, and you mentioned photo books. And honestly, if I think about what you're saying and what we've kind of explored here, that has guided our approach towards photo books. And we've sort of decided that that's our middle ground. Is if I look right over there, which you can't see, but I'm pointing off screen here, there's a stack of, I think, 6 photo books starting in 2011. And I can walk over there and pull up basically a yearbook and immediately leaf through it and see pictures. Now, someone might say, well, why don't you just pull out your phone or pull out your computer? It's not the same. And I've seen this over and over when visitors come over, especially when family comes over. If we pull out the photo books and people page through it, we get a totally different reaction than if we just pull up old photos on the computer. And as we're taking photos throughout the year, my wife and I will kind of keep that in mind, that, oh yeah, we need this particular shot for the photo book, or don't forget to get one of all 3 kids at this thing because we did that last year for the photo book. So we might not have our pictures displayed on the wall, but we really have tried to be consistent about getting those photo books made, because that's how we have sort of decided to get prints made of our pictures.
I think that's awesome, and I think it's interesting that you have them sitting out so that you have like an end table or something where they're just sitting there and that's their place.
Yeah. And we thought about keeping them in behind a cabinet, like behind a glass door. But we just decided that if we went to the trouble of making these, we want people to see them. So we just have them out, and you can walk over and pick up a photo book and check out the year 2012 and what it looked like at our family.
That's really cool. That's actually one thing we're missing, because I've got 4 photo books in front of me. I have some design tips from my wife that I'm going to bring up. Excellent. And all 4 of these came out of a bookshelf, and we hadn't touched them in months. And I really like the way you have that. Maybe it's so simple. Just don't put them on a shelf where they blend in with all the other books and board games. Put them on an end table. Put them somewhere where you can get a tiny little shelf for your wall, and just leave it sitting there, perched up against the wall. I mean, right? Instead of a frame for one, you've got a book. It's like a little display of your photo books.
And what's the worst that could happen? They get damaged. Well, we still have the digitals, so we still have our pictures. In our case, the photo book company got bought out, and so we can't actually go back and get the books reprinted. But it's a risk we're willing to take, because we still, I guess, could construct it from scratch. We have all the digitals. So yeah, if the books get a little bent or worn, then that means people are looking through them, and that's good. So
yeah, that adds more. That adds more. As Calvin's dad would say, it adds character.
It does. Yeah, it adds character. So Phil, what do you got for show and tell here?
Sure. So I asked my wife about it, because she's.
I'm anxious to see what you got.
You're anxious. Yeah, sorry. Yes. So I asked my wife, because she's the one that really does this printing, what kind of her thoughts and tips were. And she pulled out these 4 photo books and just went into way more detail than we have time to go into about how she builds these things and how much thought goes into them, and showed me over time. And so I thought I'd bring that up and just share it with our listeners, that you can build these things super quick and get results that are okay. Or like you were talking about earlier, spend the time that it really does take. And I think you'll appreciate the results more if you do spend more time. You know, do it a couple nights a week for an hour or two here and there, and spend a month putting the thing together, because you won't regret it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying these aren't rushed, but so in this particular book, we've got, this is from 2012, and it's one of the first ones that we did. And so this won't work if you're not watching the video, but Simon, maybe you can help me here. The idea in here is that we've got one print on each page. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And for the audio listeners, he's flipping through the pages, and each page has one picture of their kids. That's
it. There's a background. And so this one has a little collage, but
yeah, sure.
That's it. It's just one print per page. And
it's really nice. It's classy.
Thank you. I don't know where we got this from. Doesn't even say in here. Oh, Portrait Innovations. That's one of our favorite places to go.
That's just a local place, right?
I'm not sure,
but
I'm not sure if it's local or not. So I guess that one was from 2012, and that was sort of a more simpler thing. This one that I've got here is from, well, this is also from the same year, but it's one that we built over time.
Okay.
And here, I'll just bring up here. This was a page about a baptism, my daughter's baptism.
Hey, I see some people are recognizing that.
It's got 3 bigger pictures on one page, and then 4, not a collage, but 4 separate chosen prints on the next page. So you can look at this single page laying open and say, hey, this whole page tells the story. And you can look at all these prints and see, get an idea of what happened in that entire trip or entire experience on one page. And there's something more tangible, more memorable about seeing your photos that way, instead of, because it tells more of a story having fun like that. Whereas if you've got one print per page, or maybe 2 prints per page, then you're sort of in that flipping through the cell phone thing.
Yes,
where you just,
it doesn't tell
flip, you just flip through the pages trying to find, you maybe comment on one and say, oh, that one's pretty cool. And then,
no,
I've got one more. I'm going to show you.
Okay.
There's a handsome guy in here too.
Must be Phil.
Yeah. This is actually from a trip to Oklahoma.
Aha.
And these have same idea. They've got bigger photos on one side of the page, and then a whole bunch of smaller photos on the other side of the page.
And they all tell that same story, though.
This thing here just shows a day at the park and a visit to the zoo. And then the next page is something else. But you sit there and you can look at those pages, and then you can go on telling that story to the people who are looking through that book. You can talk for a half an hour about your trip to the zoo and say, oh, that turtle, remember that turtle? And yeah, and the kid will be like, oh, we fed him this thing and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it'll just keep on going.
It's interesting you say that, because the storytelling element, I feel like so much we try and capture that storytelling element digitally. And for the whole of human history, the only way that we could pass stories on was through oral tradition. I had to tell you a story until we invented language. But even then, the literacy rate was a barrier. So you had to learn how to read and write. And now we still, but we have much more access to storytelling. But there's something very primal in passing down stories orally. And if I'm looking through a photo book, it's generally a collaborative process. So I'm looking at your photo book, Phil, and you are part of my experience because you are telling me about the photos. And so as I'm leafing through, we're dialoguing about these pictures, and you're telling me stories about what's happening, and you're filling in all these blanks, because I might see the turtle that you mentioned, and I might see an ice cream cone. One of your kids eating ice cream, but you're filling in the blanks, and you're telling me, oh yeah, so first we went to see a turtle, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then my daughter was hungry, so we got an ice cream. And now we're combining these that we're basically doing what our ancestors did from time immemorial, looking at cave paintings on the wall. We're seeing a visual record, and then we're telling the story behind that visual record. Whereas now there's a tendency to record everything and video everything and take photos of everything. So we don't, well, I don't even know why. But you know what I mean? You go to an event, your kids play, and there's half the people in the audience are videoing the whole thing. And I think, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that there's something really primal about the human experience when we talk about looking through physical pictures and telling the stories behind those pictures. And what you've described here with your photo books, having a continuity of experience across a set of pages, it allows that story to be told much more than just isolated pictures here and here of one kid on this page and one kid on this page, and there's no story behind it. So I think what you're saying is a fantastic idea. And if anyone is looking to get into printing a photo book, that's a good way to go. Find a way to tell a story visually across the pages.
I feel like you just pulled a mic drop on this whole show.
Well,
because yeah, the primal experience of cave paintings, that's what this is in my wall, in my office.
And you're in a basement. You're literally in a cave right now, Phil. And if I were to walk down, have my little fire torch, and see hieroglyphs, scratchings, I'm looking at pictures on the wall, and I'm coming to your cave house, and you're telling me stories about your kids, the exact 100% same way our ancestors did it from the long before human history began. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Like, I think we're speaking to the power of the printed photograph here. We're also speaking to the length of this podcast. And I promised at the outset, I promised some hard advice. So Phil, tell people, where do you get your pictures printed?
Okay. Most of our prints that we're just going to put in a frame, or shoot, yeah. I mean, if we're just getting prints made, they're Walgreens. That's it. They're cheap. It's a mile away. And heck, the last time I needed a print for something, I needed one print. And so it cost me 29 cents. And I stopped in after I picked the kids up from school needed. That's where we go to get that kind of thing done. For something a little more professional, I mentioned a place called Portrait Innovations. That is here in Lincoln. I don't know if it's across the country or not. My wife thought it was. You asked me if it was. I said, I don't know.
Okay.
So,
and you will take your photos there to get them printed?
No, we go there to get photos taken.
Oh, okay.
And then for the express purpose of getting prints made. Okay. That's where some of these books come from. It's that we can lay out the books and order them right there.
Okay. Sure.
Shoot, let me see. Some of these other ones came from one of those really, the end product's nice, but it was one of those really crappy websites where you have to download, like, My Publisher.
Yeah.
Horrible software on your computer.
You know what
this is, My Publisher. And
I think we might have
recommended. Get me started.
Yeah. So My Publisher is what we used for our photo books, and they were recommended to us. And I think my wife might have actually recommended them to your wife. And we can't stand that place because the software is so bad. and then they got bought out, so you can't even go back there anymore. And for a while we used them because we didn't really know anything else. And now so much of this is done in the browser rather than software that you download. It's a lot easier, but we're the same way. We get photos from Walgreens, and if you look at the quality of prints, I don't know, man, they look okay.
Yeah, they're good enough for most of the things we're going to do.
Yeah, if we want a higher level of quality, we go online to mpix.com or adaramapix.com. But honestly, I'm no expert in colorization. They all look pretty good. We get our Christmas card photo. I design our photo every year. The photo that we put on our Christmas card. Yeah, I take a family photo and then I add text and graphics and stuff, and I just get it printed as if it were a 4x6 print. It's not like a special deal. I go to Walgreens and get 29-cent prints, only 300 of them. And for those, we have noticed that we're not super happy with the Walgreens prints. They come out a little washed out and things like that, that I don't normally notice on regular prints of my kids whenever I do get it made. So then we go to a slightly fancier place like MPix or Adaramapix. Other than that, the place that we're investigating now that my publisher got shut down is Shutterfly, which I think is the place that actually bought my publisher. And I sat and set up accounts at probably 8 or 9 photo book websites, uploaded sample photos, played around with software in an effort to find a really good one. I don't know. They all got their ups and downs, but I kept on coming back to Shutterfly mostly because it's easy to use. Our uncle, Frank, actually owns a photo printing place in Waite Park, Minnesota called The Camera Shop, and they do prints in-house. And if anyone wants to get some photos printed, you can send up to The Camera Shop. But as Phil and I sat down to record this, I showed Phil the most recent issue of Consumer Reports. This is the December 2017 issue. It came in my mailbox today. And as luck would have it, they have a 4-page article on where to get your photos printed. So, Phil, do you know where they say to get your photos printed? Any guesses?
Not a clue.
Okay, so I'll just read a small blurb here. It says, after testing photo print quality of top 10 services, plus 2 of our own top scoring home printers, we applied numerical values. Basically, they submitted a whole bunch of photos to a whole bunch of sites and got the results back, and they rated them and ranked them. You know what the number 1 place was that they recommend?
Walmart.
Walgreens.
No.
I'll show you. I've got the video right here. Walgreens. They recommend Walgreens. And then right under that is adaramapix.com. And Walmart is number 3.
Oh,
Can you believe it? And it's so funny because you wouldn't think Walgreens of all places. And honestly, that's where I say I disagree, because I actually don't like the Walgreens prints. I think they're okay, but they're also convenient, and that's why I like them. They're just down the street. But according to Consumer Reports, Walgreens is one of the best places you can go. And the fancy ones, there's one called Nations Photo Lab, which they review in here, and that's one of the more kind of elite places. They didn't even rank them that high. They said Nations was like number 8 or 9 on their list. So to me, if anyone out there is wondering about all this stuff with printing and they're finally ready to get prints made, but you don't know where to get your prints made, you just want good prints, apparently Walgreens is awesome. And you might quibble over like, well, this doesn't look as bright or whatnot. But man, if that's your barrier, if you just don't know where to get your photos printed, Consumer Reports says Walgreens is the number 1 place, followed by Adaramapix, which is online, which is similarly priced, and then third is Walmart. So I guess my advice would be, don't let that be the barrier. The place you get your photos printed shouldn't be the stopgap or the one roadblock, because just take them to Walgreens and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
the other,
that's crazy. I didn't think that
I
Walgreens would top that list, but the
had no
convenience is
idea.
there, and
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. If you're not sure where to get started, it's so cheap.
Yeah,
Spend
it
a couple
is.
bucks, get your prints made, and you'll
Yeah.
probably like what you.
Yeah. If you're an Amazon Prime member, Amazon has a photo service. They do 4x6 prints for like 9 cents a piece. And you get free shipping, I think, if you're a Prime member. Maybe you have to a minimum order or something, but it might be an option. But don't let that be the barrier. Just if you at all want to get some prints made, just get your prints made at Walgreens, for crying out loud, or go to Amazon where you probably have Prime anyway. If it's important to you to get the prints, don't spend days trying to find the best place, because there's probably Walgreens in your town that'll do it. I also want to mention one more thing before we close down. There's a place online called chatbooks.com, and they they're like a middle ground between what you're talking about with Google, where Google picks the best photos. If you go to chatbooks.com, basically you link it up to your Instagram, and they take the logic of, if you're posting a photo to Instagram, you probably already think it's a good photo. And every interval, they just send you a photo book, because you've already done the job of curating and culling through your photos. And after 60 photos, after you post 60 photos to Instagram, they will just send you a book of those 60 photos. And I think it's a monthly fee, like $8 a month or something, or maybe it's $8 per book. But they have this middle ground, because they figure you've already done the job of picking, quote, the best photos, and you can opt for a preview. So they'll send you an email and say, we've finished making your photo book. Do you want to double check it? And maybe you've got some pictures of your lunch or something that you don't want in a photo book. But they take the idea that rather than making the photo book creation the barrier to entry, they just do it for you. But they make sure you've already selected the photos because you post them on Instagram. So we don't subscribe to it.
What's it called again?
Chatbooks.com, chatbooks. And we don't subscribe to it, but I've seen it and it looks fantastic. So I can't recommend it, but I would say check it out. Phil, we are way over time.
Yeah, this feels like, all right, this feels like this might be our longest show yet, but
Yeah.
I love this. This topic is just so fun.
And
Go ahead.
Is there anything else you want to mention?
Oh gosh. I don't think so. I think we hit just about everything. One concern that you might ask at some point is my camera good enough? Is this point and shoot good enough? Is my cell phone good enough? How many megapixels do I need? Well, that same thing we just talked about, just get some prints made and try it. I mean,
yeah,
Apple and Google and Samsung, they have some of the best cameras on the phones that you can in the world, period. And you will not be disappointed with prints of those photos. You got a cheaper cell phone, maybe, but just print some photos. They're 25 cents or 9 cents or whatever. Generally speaking, if it looks good on your phone, it'll look pretty good when you get it printed.
Yep. Exactly.
At a small scale.
Don't
get posters made of something you took with, your kid's cell phone, but we're not talking about posters.
And the final thought I want to add in that same vein is regarding megapixels. The recommended minimum DPI, or dots per inch, for a photo is about 200. So if you measure out an inch on a piece of paper, 200 dots would fit in that inch. And generally, if you print a photo at 200 DPI, it will look fine. It won't look pixelated or blocky. Phil, do you know how many megapixels a 4x6 photo is?
I don't, but I'm going to guess maybe 3 or 4.
It's actually less than 1 megapixel. It's about 0.9 megapixels. And so your camera phone, 12 megapixels. Your DSLR, it's probably 24 megapixels. That means you can print any picture you want at a 4x6, 8x10. It's going to be fine. And if you've got a DSLR or even a phone and you crop it way in, go ahead and get that printed. Don't worry about the megapixels. Don't worry about the phone, the fact that it's a camera phone. Don't worry about any of this stuff about where to get your prints made. because guess what? Walgreens has the best. Your phone is fine. It's got enough megapixels. Just make prints and it's all good. So,
all right. Thank you for wrapping that up.
Thank you.
Well,
yeah.
if you're still with us, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. It's great that we've done 10 of these shows, and I think it's great.
This is awesome.
I hope we can keep doing a lot more. And on that note, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to talk about next time?
Yep. So our next show topic is going to be formal photo sessions, and Phil and I are going to talk about that whole process. When do we get formal photos made? Where do we go? Why is it important to get formal versus informal? Like, what are the benefits of getting photo? What about money? How much money do we spend on this? Because there's a lot of people out there who, if you're like us, you go years between getting a formal photo session, and maybe there's things that we're not considering. So we're just going to discuss the concept of formal photo sessions.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be a good one.
All right. Okay, Phil.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Simon. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for sticking around, and we'll catch you guys next time.